"Chris, why are you home?" inquired Angela, my spouse for 28 years, as she entered through the garage and saw me at our kitchen table less than 10 feet away. Her body partially blocked a tall, younger man following her into our home. Angela, consistently beautiful, stands at a striking 5 feet 9 inches, weighing a healthy 145 pounds, with auburn hair falling over her shoulders. She always dresses professionally for work, and today, in a white blouse, an extra button undone, revealed enticing cleavage between her spectacular 38D cup chest. A black linen skirt highlighted her world-class legs, and 3-inch heels perfectly shaped the cheeks of her backside. Briefly contemplating Angela's seemingly foolish question, I responded by stating that I lived there. A quick flash of irritation, which had been increasingly prevalent over the past weeks, surfaced as she inquired about the reason for my presence at home at 3:30 in the afternoon. I often jest with anyone who will listen that I loved Angela since we first met. Meeting her as the administrative assistant for 4 top executives in her company, she escorted me to the senior suite for hours of meetings. Taking a chance, I asked her to dinner as she walked me back to the lobby, and the rest is history. By now, Angie's companion had maneuvered around her and stood at her side. Anticipating a smirk, I was surprised to see concern in his intelligent eyes. Clearly, things weren't going as planned. I couldn't help but question Angie about the reason for her early arrival home, an hour and a half earlier than expected. Angela and I have been inseparable since our first date. I dedicated all my energy to her and our family, establishing a successful insurance brokerage firm. With the assistance of her employer, Angela achieved a bachelor's degree in 6 years, progressing from a support role to leading HR in the company's Hartford, Connecticut office. Having loved Angela unconditionally for nearly 3 decades, I faced the transformation she had undergone with determined calmness. Desiring to break her as effectively as she broke me, I gave Angie my signature crooked grin, prompting her response, "We came home early to talk with you." I questioned Angie about the collective reference to "we," locking eyes with her. Taking advantage of the moment to introduce himself, her companion confidently stated that he was Michael Browner, the new attorney at Kellerman & Sons, closely collaborating with Ong for the past couple of months. Despite his extended hand, which I ignored, and while maintaining eye contact with Angie, I refrained from reacting violently, opting to growl and assert that I knew exactly who and what he was. For the first time, I noticed signs of concern in my wife, and she cringed when I mentioned Ong. "You once threatened severe consequences for anyone who called you Ong. Why tolerate such disrespect in your own home from this individual I'm referring to as Mofo?" I pointed in his direction. Angie, habitually worried and confused, is a meticulous planner. I was certain she and Mofo had meticulously planned for every possible scenario for this conversation, with every I dotted and every T crossed. In her perception, I was already a compliant, betrayed man. A quick glance at Mofo brought a smile to my face. I was fairly certain his sphincter muscle was tightening, soon to be clenched as tightly as mine. A tumultuous situation was brewing, unlike anything Angie and her companion could envision. Taking 2 or 3 deep, cleansing breaths, I endeavored to push aside the growing rage and disgust into a quiet corner of my heart. Internally, I resolved to proceed, thinking it was time to disrupt their plans once more. I suggested the idea of making 3 drinks and proposed discussing matters in the living room. Angie requested a subdued glass of wine. When turning to the other person, he appeared wary. Responding to my offer, he mentioned Angela's information about my liking for bourbon and craft beer. Nodding, I confirmed as I rose from the kitchen table and headed to the family room's bar. Exiting the room, I heard immediate, urgent whispering as they moved through the kitchen to the living room. A few minutes later, I joined them. They sat together on the sofa. Handing Angie her favorite Merlot and Mofo a tulip glass of ambrale, I settled into an armchair across from them. After raising my glass in salute, I took a sip of the fiery liquid. Returning the toast, Mofo sipped his beer, studying the color and carbonation. He made a remark about the complexity of the amber ale, asking about its identity. I responded that it was Pabst Blue Ribbon. At the mention of the beer, Mofo's eyes flared with anger, and Angie, appearing confused, mentioned my previous claim that Pabst Blue Ribbon was worse than donkey urine and considered the worst beer ever made. She was midway through her comment when she saw me laughing. She expressed her frustration, stating that I was being rude and condescending during what was supposed to be a calm conversation. I responded with a smile, questioning her accusation and suggesting that we needed to kickstart our conversation properly. I anticipated learning about having a polite, uplifting, and loving discussion from my wife. Angie cringed and avoided eye contact. S. White took over, beginning to discuss matters. I interrupted, directing my attention to him and pointing out his initial use of Mr. Harrington before presumptuously switching to calling me Chris. I insisted on being addressed as Mr. Harrington. As his face began to redden, I concluded with a shrug and suggested the alternative of addressing me as Sir. Instead of allowing S. White to continue, I turned to Angie and asked with heat, inquiring about the topic she wanted to discuss. When S. White seemed prepared to respond, I interjected, informing him that I was addressing my wife and instructing him to sit there, drink his complex amber ale, and remain quiet. Angie, in a state of fury, expressed her discontent with my behavior that afternoon, insisting that it needed to stop. I nodded, giving the appearance of contemplating her request, and posed a question about whether my behavior was better or worse than hers over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Angie, partially confused and worried, asked for clarification. Mofo seemed to hold his breath, perhaps thinking their carefully crafted plan had derailed. Locking eyes with Angie, I revealed that I was disturbed, expressing my uncertainty about what upset me more, her involvement with someone else, or her treating me like an imbecile. Angela's expression showed her astonishment. Her eyes narrowed, and she, in a hushed voice, mentioned having more friends at my office than I did. She received an anonymous email 2 weeks ago, warning about my alleged affair. The email included 3 attachments depicting me on a picnic lunch at Middlewoods Park, engaging in hand-holding and kissing. Apologizing for the way she found out, Angela was in the process of figuring out how to continue when I interjected, asking if she wanted a divorce. She responded negatively, moving to the edge of the couch, leaning forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and passionately expressing her love for me. Angela clarified that her involvement with Michael was a short-term fling, explaining that he was new to Connecticut and hadn't made many friends. She anticipated him finding a regular girlfriend once he was settled. Apologetic, she acknowledged that the situation didn't work for her, as she had signed up for a monogamous relationship with a loving wife. She concluded by stating that she was sorry, but a divorce would better align with her future plans. Angela pleaded with me to stop, expressing her disinterest in a divorce and suggesting that I probably felt the same. She characterized her involvement with Michael as a one-time fling, emphasizing that it was nothing more and that it stemmed from her attraction to him and a desire for extra excitement in her life. She assured me that it had never happened before and would soon be over, promising that it would never occur again. After taking a small sip of my bourbon, I remained silent for a few moments before responding. I pointed out that her promises held no meaning and asserted that everyone in the room knew she was a liar. Anticipating Angela's reaction, I continued, questioning why I should believe this was her first affair and suggesting that it could be her 51st. I urged her to think about our shared efforts in building a family and mentioned that, with Kelly married and contemplating starting her own family, we could now slow down and plan for a wonderful retirement. I expressed the belief that in a few years my fling with Michael would be long over and forgotten. I rose from my seat and, without inquiring if anyone desired another drink, walked to the din and replenished my glass. I was certain my lack of courtesy did not go unnoticed by the 2 individuals in the living room. Upon my return, I observed them huddled together and engaged in a whispered conversation. Mofo sought permission to speak, asking if he could express a few things. In response, I allowed him the floor with a disgusted reply. After gathering his thoughts, he conveyed that Angela was correct in characterizing their relationship as a short-term fling. He expressed regret for getting involved with a married woman, emphasizing that it was something he had never done before. Acknowledging the connection they shared, he spoke about Angela's exceptional qualities. While understanding my mention of divorce in the heat of the moment, he cautioned against it in the long term, noting the decades we had invested together and advising against throwing it away. Additionally, he mentioned Angela's initial concerns about the prenuptial agreement, suggesting its vulnerability due to its age and changes in the legal landscape. He dismissed its enforceability, claiming proof of infidelity was lacking. I pondered how my wife had become so misguided as he concluded his legal summation. Turning to Angela, I expressed my inability to understand her choice of seeking legal advice from a corporate attorney who graduated in the bottom quarter of his class from Texas Southern University Law School, a consistently ranked among the top 10 worst law schools in the country. I questioned how she knew that S-Wipe didn't finish, explaining that knowing one's enemy was one of my mottos. Redirecting my attention to Angela, I inquired about her plan moving forward. After taking a few moments to think, she disclosed that she and Michael were spending the weekend together. She detailed their itinerary, mentioning her presence at his apartment that night and a trip to New York City the next day. They planned to stay there Friday and Saturday night, with her returning home on Sunday. Despite being aware of their exact plans, the audacity of my wife's statement deeply saddened me. I expressed my disappointment, hoping she could perceive the profound sadness in my eyes. I pointed out the impact on our quarterly getaway weekend tradition to New York City, filled with memories of spectacular sights and heartwarming experiences such as award-winning Broadway plays, concerts, and sporting events. I conveyed my feelings about the tarnishing of those memories and expressed concern about the change in Angela, comparing her to the person she was involved with. Angela sensed my devastation and responded accordingly, but I was too consumed by the voices in my head urging me to end it. Turning to a very concerned mofo, I questioned him about his wife's reaction to his involvement with mine. Angela urged me to stop, explaining that Michael was a widower and his wife had passed away several years ago. Even mofo displayed some decency, cringing at my wife's last statement. I smirked and addressed Angela, remarking on the contrast between Michael and her. Without pause, I inquired about her being widowed, and Michael hesitantly confirmed it. I reached down and retrieved a manila folder from the backpack next to my chair. After opening it and scanning the first page, I revealed details about Michael's late wife, Dr. Cynthia Browner. She was an emergency department surgeon at Ascension St. John's Hospital in Detroit, with a husband, Michael, and 2 daughters, Katie and Lacey. The document mentioned her resignation and relocation to the Hartford, Connecticut area to join her husband immediately after her children finished school. Despite my dissatisfaction with my marriage, I couldn't help but find the look on Angela's face amusing. Angela confronted me about the revelation, asking if I had lied to her. In response, I couldn't contain my laughter, expressing amusement at the situation of a cheat and a liar accusing each other of dishonesty. Michael intervened by reaching out and cupping Angela's hand. Just before I could protest, anger boiling inside me, I realized something unsettling. I just didn't have the energy to care anymore. Angela's companion, Ong, began apologizing, confessing to his deceit and professing his desire for her. It was sickening to hear. He stood there, holding her hand, making plans for their future together, as if I didn't even exist. Angela, after a brief moment of contemplation, took his hand and turned to face me, promising to cut ties with Michael and return to being the loving wife she claimed to be. As they exchanged words, my heart sank further. It was like watching my world crumble before my eyes. Finally, I gathered the strength to speak up. I requested their attention, asking for the chance to lay out my thoughts and feelings, to be heard amidst their betrayal. They exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond to my request for fairness. I pushed the issue, emphasizing the importance of giving me just 30 minutes of their time. After some reluctance, they finally acquiesced and took their seats. With practiced ease, I set up several Zoom meetings, a skill I had honed during the COVID-19 pandemic. As the TV screen flickered to life, I addressed Peter and Lou, asking if they could hear me. Once the introductions were made, I stunned Angela and her companion by revealing the presence of Lou Baird, my new divorce attorney, and Michael Browner, a corporate attorney. Handing the floor over to the attorneys, Lou wasted no time in laying out the situation. He informed Angela, now addressed as Mrs. Harrington, that he was representing me in our impending divorce, and that papers had already been filed. He gave her a deadline to secure her own legal representation and arranged to be served, warning of the consequences of non-compliance. Lou disclosed that infidelity was cited as the cause for divorce, supported by detailed evidence collected by a private investigator documenting her affair with Mr. Browner. Their shock was palpable as the reality of the situation sank in. As Lou concluded his remarks, I placed a second manila folder onto the coffee table in front of Angie, causing both of them to react with surprise at the loud sound. I informed them that it contained a copy of our divorce petition, along with the private investigator's report. As Aswape reached for the folder, Angie briefly glanced back at the screen. I then stated our intention to insist on the full enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, emphasizing its regular review every 2 years to align with state legal guidelines. With Angie's signed and notarized signature on every update for the past 28 years, I expressed confidence in its enforceability. Next, I conveyed the decision made by the board of directors of Harrington Brokerage the previous night, which relieved Angie of all corporate responsibilities and severed her association with my firm entirely. I outlined the timeline for returning her company car, canceling company credit cards and cell phone, and terminating memberships to various clubs. Additionally, I mentioned the cancellation of joint credit cards and the freezing of joint financial accounts, all in accordance with the prenuptial agreement. We then detailed our request for an 80-20 split of assets in my favor, including the retention of the house free and clear by myself, along with the request for expedited eviction and a 30-day period for Angie to remove her personal belongings from the property. I mentioned the absence of alimony and child support, and noted that there were additional claims which Angie's attorney could explain. Lou concluded by asking if there was anything he had missed, to which I responded that he had covered all the essential points, expressing appreciation for his thoroughness. As the TV screen went black, Angie immediately stood up and exclaimed that they should wait. She turned to me and requested to bring them back as she had questions. I responded by informing her that it doesn't work that way, and she would need to hire her own lawyer to get answers. Angie then expressed her frustration, threatening to destroy me. With a smirk, I turned to her companion and inquired about his legal opinion on the potential impact of this development in the divorce. His lack of response caused Angie to sink back into the couch, visibly distressed. I couldn't help but smile widely as I waved the TV remote at her before pointing it at the TV again. As the second Zoom meeting commenced, I addressed Jake and confirmed if he could hear me. He responded, stating that he had a conference call to attend and needed to keep it brief. He proceeded to inform Browner of his termination, stating that his personal items were being removed from his office and would be left in the lobby, with a 24-hour window for retrieval before disposal. Jake mentioned that there would be no recommendation provided to Angela. I could sense Angela's fear, as her boss's voice slowed down and sighed. Observing her shaking, I realized she was terrified. Despite expressing disappointment in Angela's behavior as a senior member of his staff, Jake acknowledged her 29 years of exemplary service. However, he announced that her position in Hartford had been eliminated and offered her a similar role at their facility in Albany, New York. He gave her a week to decide on the transfer and 30 days to complete the relocation. The screen went blank again, leaving Angie in tears, while her companion slouched back on the couch. I was purposely smirking at Mofo. When he saw me, his rage started to build. He was younger, bigger, and, I'll guess, stronger. Unfortunately for him, he was as stupid as a bag of rocks. As Mofo was ready to explode, I once again waved the remote, pointed it toward the TV, and pressed a button. The screen lit up, and I asked, "Dr. Browner, can you hear me?" Mofo and Angie sat in stunned silence. They were white as ghosts, and their mouths were hanging open. The face of a beautiful blonde filled the screen. Cynthia addressed Michael, informing him that she had filed for divorce and that he should expect to be served in the coming days. She stated her intention to remain in Michigan with their children and mentioned that she had managed to retain her position at the hospital. Michael pleaded with Cynthia, asking her to reconsider and suggesting that they could work things out, insisting that his affair was just a fling. The expression on Cynthia's face, as seen on the screen, indicated her disgust. Cynthia dropped a bombshell, revealing Michael's repeated job losses due to his infidelity. Her additional investigation, following Chris's prompt, painted a damning picture. She listed off the names of Angie's associates, detailing Michael's affairs with each of them. Angie remained silent as Cynthia laughed off any expectation of an answer. declaring Michael unwelcome in her home and requesting his address for his belongings. As the screen faded to black, Michael's threat sent a surge of adrenaline through me. Without hesitation, I retrieved my Colt .45, aiming it squarely at him. The sight of the weapon seemed to physically stagger Michael, but I didn't flinch. I laid down the law, giving him a choice: leave or stay quiet. His silence was the only acceptable response, and thankfully, he chose to comply. Turning back to the screen, I caught sight of Angie's tear-streaked face, her anguish evident. It was a gut-wrenching sight that stirred a mix of empathy and resolve within me. Angie disclosed that she had been seeing a counselor for the past 2 weeks, which prompted her to groan and cry. She expressed frustration, remarking on the irony that despite her actions, she was the one seeking mental health support. I responded with a laugh, acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. Later, I recounted to Angela an insightful question posed by Dr. Waters during our counseling session. She asked whether I understood the saying, "Love is blind," which struck a chord with me. I reflected on how my love for Angie had blinded me to her flaws, even to the point of ignoring her infidelity. Despite everything, I conveyed the depth of my love for her, expressing doubt that she would find anyone else who loved her as intensely as I did. Angie, still visibly upset, explained that she intended to continue seeing Dr. Waters, emphasizing the importance of having someone trustworthy to confide in, especially after such a traumatic experience. She expressed disbelief at the extent of the humiliation and disrespect she endured from someone she loved deeply. However, she remained optimistic, stating her determination to overcome the hurt and move on from the relationship. Angie mentioned discussing her plans for the day with Dr. Waters, who had reservations about seeking revenge, but approved of the first 3 Zoom meetings as a form of payback. However, Dr. Waters advised against the next Zoom meeting, fearing it might set back Angie's personal recovery due to the emotional pain it could cause. I've considered it and will acknowledge that Dr. Wilson is probably correct. The upcoming Zoom meeting is likely to do more damage than good, but I don't care. This meeting will hurt me, but it will cripple you. As I held up the remote for the 4th time and waved it at Angie, she shrunk back into the couch. In a panic, I pointed it at the TV and pushed the button. All eyes were riveted to the screen, and when the face appeared, Angie expressed distress, murmuring in anguish. Chris's daughter, Kelly, then expressed her love for her father, prompting him to reciprocate. Angie cried out, questioning how Chris could treat her so poorly. Kelly interjected, revealing that she had overheard Angie's conversation with her boyfriend and was aware of their actions and plans. She expressed her disappointment and disgust towards her mother, calling her actions grotesque and pitiful. Angie attempted to justify herself, but Kelly remained firm, asserting that Angie's behavior was selfish and self-absorbed. Angela expressed her deep loneliness to Kelly, explaining how much she missed her since she moved away. Kelly, appearing perplexed on the screen, questioned if Angela was blaming her for her own troubles. Angela denied this accusation, insisting it wasn't what she meant. Despite Angela's plea to come to Boston to talk, Kelly rejected the idea, citing Angela's plans to be with her new boyfriend and their private celebration nearer to Cape Cod. Kelly revealed her pregnancy and her intention to celebrate with those who bring love and happiness, not the negativity that has consumed Angela's life. Angela, asserting her maternal authority, demanded an invitation, but Kelly firmly refused, seeking a celebration devoid of the turmoil Angela represents. For the 4th time, the screen went blank while Angela sat, visibly upset. I stood up and discreetly placed my pistol at the back of my pants. I announced that I was going out for dinner and would return in 2 hours. Addressing Angela, I requested her to pack her belongings and essentials, informing her that she wouldn't be allowed back until the court responded to my divorce petition, a process expected to take about a week. Turning to Mofo, I reminded him of my capabilities and gave him 3 days to leave the state, warning of severe consequences if he remained by Monday. As I pulled open the front door, I glanced back at the defeated individuals and mentioned the supposed beauty of the upcoming weekend in New York. Second story. My name is Jim Reynolds, and I'm now 56 years old, standing at 5 feet minus 8 inches, maintaining decent shape. I've been married to Kelly for 22 years, whom I believe to be my life and soul partner. Kelly, 45, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and standing at 5 feet -2 inches, is built for lovemaking. I cherished lovemaking moments with her whenever we were alone, although there were times she didn't reciprocate the favor. I spent 8 years in Special Forces right after high school, mastering explosives, followed by 6 years in engineering school. Subsequently, I established my own company, now a multi-million-dollar construction business. Not many know about my military service due to the demons I battled, leading to 4 years of counseling. My pilot's license predates my military service, but Kelly never trusted me enough to join me for rides. I fell in love with Kelly from the first moment, and we married 2 years later. Coming from old money, with her maiden name as Moore, she descended from Richard Moore of the Mayflower. Kelly's family, however, viewed me as a mere servant. Despite this, I spared no expense on her, buying a large house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, complete with a 4-car garage and a BMW. We have 2 kids, or more accurately, she has 2 kids, John, 21, and the 19-year-old, both in college. I bought them each brand new BMWs, and I own a 10-year-old GMC 4-wheel drive pickup. About 6 years ago, they began mistreating me, later revealing they don't consider me family. They don't heed my words and do as they please, only listening to Kelly, their mother. I hired John 8 years ago, thinking he was my best friend, but the kids seemed to adore him. Approximately a year ago, Kelly inadvertently left her email open, and my curiosity led me to read through them all. To my disbelief, she professed to have despised me since we met, a sentiment echoed by her entire family. Shockingly, I discovered the kids aren't mine. They belong to my ex-best friend, John, a truth they've known for about 6 years. Unbeknownst to me, John knew Kelly before I hired him, and the situation amuses them. My son Rick and John, my ex-best friend, find humor in my obliviousness. Upon marrying Kelly, my father-in-law insisted on a prenup, which I signed. It expires in 2.5 years after 25 years of marriage, and includes an infidelity clause stipulating that cheaters leave with nothing. A friend from my military days, Kevin, connected me with Paul, an expert in surveillance. Paul set up a system where Kelly's emails are forwarded to a private account of mine, along with copies of my kids' emails. My entire house is wired to allow me to hear their phone calls, and I have video recordings. Without Kevin's intervention, my family might have faced dire consequences. He dissuaded me from resorting to violence and suggested ways to hurt my family emotionally, such as taking their money, tarnishing their family name, and exposing their disgrace publicly. John and his friends mock me, well aware of the prenup and the affair, eagerly anticipating the arrival of Tom, my best friend, to take over. I possess a video of my father-in-law discussing a plan to create the illusion that I received funding for my company from him. Their scheme involves having John take control of my business, a plan they've been plotting for years. This explains their strategic move to have John apply for a position at my company and act as if he were my closest ally. The only individuals I genuinely trust are my old military buddies, and I'm grateful for maintaining contact with them. I've enlisted Paul as a computer consultant for my company, and he has secured its network, helping me identify allies and foes. This provided me with about 1.5 years to prepare for an impending divorce. During this time, I assumed a role that required me to endure a strained relationship, refraining from expressions of love and engaging in physical closeness only to maintain appearances. Reflecting on how she mistreated me, I intensified these encounters to inflict emotional distress. I made sure to do so only when I was certain she hadn't been involved with John, often sending him out of town for business without her catching on. Although I acknowledge past indiscretions, I pretended ignorance to keep up the appearance that John remained my closest friend. To humiliate her, I engaged in public encounters and discreetly conducted DNA tests that revealed our children weren't biologically mine, but rather John's. Their elaborate plan involved John taking over the company after our divorce, aiming to exploit and embarrass me. Privately, I met with a competitor to sell my company at a reduced price, as I trusted his honesty despite our prior competition. I disclosed my reasons for the sale, ensuring confidentiality among a select few, including our lawyers. The law firm I hired shared my disdain for my father-in-law, a key factor in my decision to engage their services. They provided guidance on establishing a private bank account and phone account. Additionally, They suggested convincing Kelly and the kids to lease cars instead of buying new ones, a proposal well received by everyone involved, ensuring annual upgrades at a lower cost for me. Quietly, I began packing my belongings and placing them in a rented storage shed. People would often laugh either in front of me or behind my back. I suggested to Kelly that we start filing our taxes separately and transfer the house solely into her name for tax purposes. To achieve this, we needed a new mortgage solely in her name, a concept her entire family supported, making it simpler for her to claim the house in the divorce. My new law firm also recommended this to protect my credit. Despite her desire for home improvements, including an in-ground pool, I allowed her to have what she wanted, funded by a second mortgage in her name. Since the house was now solely in her name, the loans also had to be in her name. Half of the funds went towards the changes she wanted, while the other half discreetly found its way into my private account unnoticed. I continued handling all the bills, altering my insurance beneficiaries to direct funds to charities in the event of my demise. I sold my company without attracting attention, ensuring the new owners retained all employees except for John and his associates. Within a year, everything was prepared for my departure. I proposed treating the entire family, including in-laws and my now ex-best friend John, to a 2-week trip to Europe, a move they likely mocked behind my back, yet it served my purpose, especially since Kelly footed the bill. I purchased 150 acres of land in Alaska discreetly, accessible only by plane, utilizing my concealed pilot's license. Plans were made for an off-grid cabin on stilts and a plane shelter, with a hired company to build it, aiming for a move-in ready status. Recognizing the longer timeline for completion, I also bought a house with a large barn-like garage. My residence would be in Fairbanks, a simple house where I could keep a motorhome and have a place to stay when I wanted to travel. A military friend, who shared my dislike for my in-laws, registered a new motorhome in his name. Despite his reluctance, I insisted on compensating him and my other friends for their assistance. From Kelly's emails, they believed I was naive. I ceased payments on the house, their cars, insurances, and utilities, all in Kelly's name. Thus, her credit would suffer, not mine. Establishing a P.O. box in Kelly's name, I had all bills sent there, creating an illusion that I was managing their finances. When the divorce is finalized, her credit will be impacted, and with no alimony payments due to unemployment, they won't uncover the details of my company's sale. All the funds went to an offshore account, creating the appearance that I lost the company to the new owners. Moreover, my plan involves disappearing. Just before the trip, I informed them of a company emergency, stating that I would join them later. Their lack of concern and happiness about my absence didn't go unnoticed. On the night prior to their departure, I made sure Kelly would remember me vividly. Engaging insinuate, I pushed boundaries for the first and final time, leaving her initially pleased, but ultimately sore and angry. Too bad for John, who had been involved with her for years, but had denied me the same experiences. Once they departed for Europe, I returned to the house, leaving it wide open. My friend Paul retrieved surveillance equipment, and I paid a moving van company in cash to transport my belongings to Alaska. I took essentials such as clothes, tools, and fishing gear, along with weapons from my military days, securely stored until my arrival. Leaving all furniture behind, I ensured they wouldn't discover my destination, leaving no paperwork mentioning Alaska. My son Mike, uninterested in hunting or fishing with me, remained unaware of my usual trip destinations. I retained my old phone account to keep Kelly oblivious to my plan, intending to close it out in about a month. Upon departure, I left my old phone with a colleague, instructing him not to answer calls from my wife, but allowing him to make calls for a month. Subsequently, I visited my in-laws' house with my keys, turning on all lights. Utilizing Mike's laptop, I posted on a college website about a week-long college kegger party at their house, anticipating potential chaos. Recognizing their frugality and preference for John, I closed all bank accounts and canceled credit cards from both my wife's and my accounts, totaling $50,000. I sold my truck to a car dealer, and after 3 days, departed for Alaska without disclosing my destination. Monitoring events through my wife's emails No one, including my wife, kids, in-laws, or ex-best friend, made any effort to inquire about my whereabouts. They enjoyed thinking everything was my responsibility, unaware that my wife Kelly was the one funding it all. I took my time enjoying the sights while crossing the country, relying solely on cash for expenses. I drove to Bellingham, Washington, hopped on a ferry to Valdez, Alaska, and then continued to Fairbanks, all without needing a passport. By the time I reached Washington, Kelly and her family had returned from Europe, finding their homes and properties wrecked, completely unaware that I orchestrated it. Surprisingly, they hadn't noticed my absence, being more concerned about their houses than my departure. It was the police, not my so-called family, who started inquiring about me on that Sunday, a day after their return to the United States. Granting my attorney written power of attorney for my divorce, I informed them that I would check in 2 weeks later without revealing my whereabouts. On Monday morning, Kelly received her infidelity divorce papers. Although I wanted to sue John for alienation of affection, Massachusetts law prohibited it due to numerous lawsuits against state politicians. Nevertheless, John and his associates lost their jobs as per my agreement with the new company owners. With all his belongings gone, it was a shame. Kelly found herself owing more than she had in the bank, pursued by creditors, and her cars repossessed. Power and water were cut off. Property taxes and both mortgages were overdue, forcing her and her spoiled kids to move into her parents' hotel since their home was completely trashed. Her parents had to rent cars for the entire family. Feeling empathy for their difficulties, John also had to move in with them, pleading with Kelly's parents for a rental car. They transitioned from BMWs to less impressive vehicles. Kelly and her family hired private investigators to locate me, while Kelly's attorneys attempted to stall the divorce, a futile move. The case gained public attention with DNA test results and explicit videos circulating online. Audio recordings exposed the affair's duration, family involvement, and their plans to ruin and humiliate me publicly, seize my company, and their disdain for the middle class. Videos and audio of her family bribing politicians and public officials and mistreating honest individuals were disseminated on various websites. The divorce eventually concluded. The judge assigned to the case had to recuse himself as he was one of the exposed, paid-off public officials. Though I reached out to the kids, they ignored me. 5 years later, during a visit to Boston to finalize some old business, I went to a restaurant frequented by her family. They walked past me without recognition. Now, sporting long gray hair, a beard, and in better shape, I asked my waiter to send their table a bottle of champagne. The entire family looked 20 years older. They stared at me, and after a few minutes, Kelly yelled, "Oh my God, you son of a Grimalkin!" She recognized me and revealed my identity to them. John attempted to confront me, but with one punch, I knocked him out. When his son approached, I subdued him, but not completely. Kelly ran up, berating me for ruining her family and hurling insults. The police arrived and arrested me. I had the waiter contact my lawyer since I doubted the police would allow me to. They reviewed the surveillance tapes, confirming my calm interaction, and subsequently released me. The footage depicted me sending champagne and calmly conversing with them, highlighting my self-defense stance. Without my lawyer's foresight in preparing for such incidents and securing copies of the surveillance tapes, I believe the police wouldn't have released me, given their connection to my father-in-law. Kelly phoned my hotel room, requesting a conversation. We met in the hotel lobby, ensuring our discussion was recorded. She questioned why I had taken such actions against her and her family. I looked at her in disbelief, calmly revealing that I discovered their plot against me and acted preemptively. I disclosed my awareness of her ongoing affair with John, questioning why she married me if she harbored hatred. I refrained from mentioning the wired house or spying through her email. They lost their house and cars. Mike lost his house and truck. Forced to live with her parents, Kelly dismissed it as nothing personal, initially escaping her family. She admitted finding pleasure in manipulating me and enjoying the situation involving John. I asked why she didn't divorce me when she met John, and she claimed it was initially enjoyable, ensuring she'd gain everything. I left it at that, returning to my room without further comment. The next day, I departed, heading back to Alaska to relish a peaceful life. I left them to grapple with the ruins I caused in their lives: credit, finances, pride, and reputation, far preferable to resorting to violence. They will have to live with the constant reminder of me,